A boy went up to his dad, who was reading the newspaper on the couch, and said, "Dad, I'm considering a career in organised crime." The dad looks up from his newspaper and asks, "Private sector or government?" Sure, it's a joke, but it's also true, and these days it's no longer clear that there's much of a difference. But what's certain is that private sector organised crime can only exist because public sector or government organised crime exists. And if you doubt me, look no further than Australia's flourishing illicit tobacco industry. The simplest definition of government is this: it's the group that claims the exclusive right to be violent in that place. Now, the government is allowed to be violent just as long as they use whatever processes the government has put in place. This might involve someone with a wig and a gavel, or it might not. It might have the appearance of due process, or it might not. But in the end, the government is allowed to be violent if the government decides that it's allowed to be violent, and no one else can. That's what makes government government. They are a monopoly on violence. That means that organised crime is just the fancy title that we give to any other group that gives itself permission to use violence. By definition, they operate outside of the authorised structure of violence, the government, to engage in unauthorised violence. And according to the government, that lack of authorisation makes all the difference. Government-authorised violence is good. Unauthorised, organised crime, private sector violence, well, that's bad. And of course, you can't compare one with the other. Problem is, the distinction between those two things is far more fragile than you might think. Consider what's happening in Australia right now with tobacco taxes. The government created a sanctioned protection racket. You can sell tobacco in Australia. You just have to pay the protection money, also known as tobacco excise, or else the government will send thugs to hurt you. This is functionally identical to the mafia demanding protection money from fruit sellers in Sicily. Pay up or else somebody might come and hurt you. Who? Well, the same people telling you to pay up. You're buying protection from them. You're paying the people who are known to be violent so that they won't be violent to you. Australia is running a tobacco protection racket in Australia. Pay the taxes for your own protection. Don't pay the taxes? Oh, then you'll need protection from us. This is public sector organised crime, done in plain sight with all the appropriate paperwork. When they use violence, they make sure it's authorised first. Authorised by the same government that is engaging in the violence, but let's not talk about that. Someone in a wig with a special title and a government paycheck has said it's okay for the government to be violent. The tax office, well, they use police as their paramilitary arm, and they bring violence to anyone who doesn't pay the tax office their protection money. And this government-run protection racket is worth billions of dollars in easy money every year. But wherever there is easy money, the private sector looks for ways to get in on the action. And that's literally what these illegal tobacco organised crime rings are doing. They're offering a private sector solution to a problem that was created by a government sector organised crime protection racket. If the government didn't create the protection racket, if tobacco was sold at market rates instead of artificially inflated, highly taxed rates, then these tobacco smugglers wouldn't have a business. There would be no money for them to make. So the private sector organised crime in tobacco exists purely because the public sector organised crime in tobacco exists. And honestly, I don't think there's much of a difference anymore. But the government's solution is, of course, not that the government should get out of the protection racket business and stop being the cause of so much violence. No, don't be ridiculous. The government's solution is that they're going to be even more violent against anyone who doesn't comply with their protection racket. Because they're the good guys, remember. We'll get to the details in a moment, but first, my name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to cut through the crap, make sense of the nonsense, and keep up with the world as it changes around you. I am 100% viewers supported. I don't have a monopoly on violence or a lucrative protection racket to fund myself. Nor do I take any money from political parties, lobby groups, no dark money from Israel or from Qatar, or from the Muppets for that matter. I have no sponsors, no advertisers, I simply say what I believe and I believe what I say. If you appreciate what I'm doing here with the Topher Project, then please help me to keep going by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.com. And check out the link in the description where you'll find my best-selling books about government, power, human rights and civil disobedience, plus my multi-award-winning documentary, Battleground Melbourne, plus my t-shirts, hoodies, caps, stickers, and most importantly, We're now just days away from the beginning of the Getting Your Head in the Game Masterclass. It starts this Thursday evening. It's the first of 8 deep dive sessions. The first session is about values, and it lays the foundation for the entire year, so you don't want to miss it. But more importantly, don't miss out on the early bird pricing, which is just $2.99 for the entire year. The year is worth $792, but it's just $2.99 for the next few days only. So click the link in the description to get your seat now. Okay, so the government are running a lucrative, violent, organised crime operation in the form of a tobacco protection racket here in Australia. And of course, the private sector is keen to provide solutions to all of our problems, including the problems that have been created artificially by government protection rackets. And so, surprise, surprise, the private market are offering cigarettes cheaper than the government. And the government is really mad that other people are cashing in on their protection racket profits. They're supposed to have a monopoly on violence. They're supposed to be the only ones who can run a protection racket in Australia, and yet there's competition. Let me be clear here. The government could collapse the illegal tobacco market instantly, overnight, by just eliminating the government-run tax racket. If the government eliminated tobacco excise and was happy to just collect the GST on the sales, the black market would collapse instantly and all the violence and the firebombings would come to an end. But that would require the government to abandon their own lucrative protection racket, and that's a price that Treasurer Jim Chalmers is not willing to pay. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it for as long as it remains true. Corruption in this country doesn't take the form of bags full of cash being handed over in dark alleyways. It happens in plain sight with all the correct paperwork and the approval of people wearing wigs and carrying badges. The government wants to keep its protection racket. It has no problem with organised crime in Australia as long as it's them. It's only the private sector organised crime industry that they have an issue with. In Victoria, the government are tripling down on their protection racket, threatening to close businesses caught selling illegal tobacco for 90 days at a time. As if black market operators are going to obey a shutdown order and not just phoenix themselves overnight as a new business. And of course, they have thousands of shopfronts around Australia selling illegal tobacco, not to mention countless other avenues to market that don't involve shopfronts. So what does the illegal tobacco industry care? They don't. In West Australia, they're threatening private sector racketeers with multi-million-dollar fines and years in prison. Okay, cool, but these are people who are already engaged in highly illegal and highly risky activities like, firebombings and drive-by shootings. I don't think they're scared of you. Tasmania jumped on board the 90-day closure idea, and New South Wales and Queensland all said, "Me too, me too." The results of these new tough measures? Well, the untaxed tobacco trade is as big as it's ever been, government revenues from their tobacco protection racket continue to fall, and their threats of increased violence against their private sector competitors are falling on deaf ears. Because here's the brutal truth. If the government wants to stop organised crime in Australia, it can do it by stopping its own organised crime first. If the government abandoned its own protection racket, then the private sector protection rackets would be worthless overnight. The only reason the government is fighting against private sector tobacco crime rings is to protect its own. Remember that next time the government claims to be the good guys. Remember that they could stop the criminals instantly if they really wanted to. All they would have to do is stop being criminals themselves. But they won't. And that should tell us something. My name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to cut through the crap, make sense of the nonsense, and keep up with the world as it changes around us. I'm 100% viewer supported, and you can help me to keep the Topher Project going by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.com. And be sure to secure your seat in the 2026 Getting Your Head in the Game Masterclass via the link in the description before it begins on Thursday this week. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. The algorithm loves you for it, and so do I. Please like, comment, subscribe, and as always, think free.